ഞാൻ നിങ്ങളോടൊക്കെ ഒന്ന് ക്ഷമ ചോദിക്കും. മലയാളത്തിലല്ല ഞാൻ പറയാൻ പോകുന്നത്. I have written my acceptance speech in English because I am a person, ഞാൻ എന്ത് പറഞ്ഞാലും ഒരു ഫോമായുടെ അവിടെ പോയാൽ പിന്നെ കോർട്ട് കേസാണ് എനിക്ക്. അപ്പോൾ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് പറയാനുള്ള സാധനത്തെ ഞാൻ ഇംഗ്ലീഷിൽ പറയും. I try to translate, but I think from your expressions you all understand, so it's okay. First of all, I want to say that I'm so honored. I'm not just honored, I feel so emotional about this moment today because we know how all of us have traveled over the last 20 years and how much we have had to understand each other and change because we are facing a very, very serious opponent. We must learn how to work together, how to overcome small or big differences, because what we are up against is the kind of political annihilation. I was telling around that for years and years, I come to Kerala. I used to come to Kerala only for a few days. I used to stay in my house, in my room or in my mother's room and go away because she was always unwell and she always hated me to come to Kerala and not be with her. So, and last year, in September, she passed away and suddenly the whole of Kerala is mine again. And I'm so happy to be here, to travel here, to speak here. I am somebody who has traveled across the world, and I cannot tell you what an incredibly special place Kerala is. Kerala pore oru sthalom illa logathu. And I know that this is a meeting. I know that this is a meeting, of people who mostly support the Marxist Party, but because of the history of communism in Kerala, I can tell you that every party in Kerala, even the Congress party, will be considered far left by the Americans, because all people in Kerala have a basic understanding of what it means to fight for your rights. And this is a history which is so, so special. I'm not going to speak about all the things that the speaker spoke about because I want to say something. English പറയുന്നത് ഇതുകൊണ്ടാണ്. This thing that I have to say, ലോകത്തിന് കേൾക്കണം, മനസ്സിലാകണം. This what I'm about to say, I'm going to speak a lot about Gaza, and I speak in English because I want the world to hear it. Thank you for bestowing this honor on me in the name of P.Govinda Pillai, one of Kerala's most outstanding scholars of Marxist theory. And thank you for asking Ram to be the person who graces this occasion. I know he won this prize last year, but he also in many ways shares the honor of this one with me. In 1998, he, as the editor of Frontline, along with Vinod Mehta, the editor of Outlook, published my first political essay, The End of Imagination, about India's nuclear tests. For years after that, he published my work, and the fact that there was an editor like him, precise, incisive, but fearless, gave me the confidence to become the writer that I am. So thank you, Ram. I'm not going to speak about the demise of the free press in India. All of us gathered here know all about that. Nor am I going to speak of what has happened to all the institutions that are meant to act as checks and balances in the functioning of our democracy. I've been doing that for 20 years, and I'm sure all of you gathered here are familiar with my views. Coming from North India to Kerala or to almost any of the southern states, I feel by turns reassured and anxious about the fact that the dread that many of us up north live with every day seems far away when I am here. It is not as far away as we imagine. If the current regime returns to power next year, in 2026, The exercise of delimitation is likely to disempower all of South India by reducing the number of MPs we send to Parliament. But delimitation is not the only threat we face. Federalism, the lifeblood of our diverse country, is under the hammer too. As the central government gives itself sweeping powers, we witness the sorry sight of proudly elected chief ministers of opposition-ruled states having to literally beg for their state's share of public funds. The latest blow to federalism is the recent Supreme Court judgment upholding the striking down of Section 370, which gave the state of Jammu and Kashmir semi-autonomous status. It isn't the only state in India to have special status, and it's a serious error to imagine that this judgment concerns Kashmir alone. It affects the fundamental structure of our polity. But today, I want to speak of something more urgent. Our country has lost its moral compass. The most heinous crimes, the most horrible declarations calling for genocide and ethnic cleansing are greeted with applause and political reward. While wealth is concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, throwing crumbs to the poor, it manages to garner support to the very powers that are further impoverishing them. The most bewildering conundrum of our times is that all over the world, people seem to be voting to disempower themselves. They do this based on the information they receive. What that information is and who controls it, that is the modern world's poisoned chalice. Who controls technology controls the world. But I believe that people cannot and will not be controlled. I believe that a new generation will rise in revolt. There will be a revolution. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There will be revolutions, plural. I said that we as a country have lost our moral compass. Across the world, millions of people, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, communist, atheist, agnostic, are marching, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. But the streets of our country, which was once a true friend of colonized people, a true friend of Palestine, which once would have seen millions marching to, are silent today. Most of our writers and public intellectuals, all but very few, are also silent. What a terrible shame. And what a sad display of a lack of foresight. As we watch the structures of our democracy being systematically dismantled, and our land of incredible diversity being shoehorned into a spurious, narrow idea of one-size-fits-all nationalism. At least those who call themselves intellectuals should know that our country too could explode. If we say nothing about Israel's brazen slaughter of Palestinians, even as it is live-streamed into the most private recesses of our personal lives, we are complicit in it. Something in our moral selves will be altered forever. Are we going to simply stand by and watch while homes, hospitals, refugee camps, schools, universities, archives are bombed, 1 million people displaced, and dead children in their thousands pulled from the rubble? The borders of Gaza are sealed. People have nowhere to go. They have no shelter, no food, no water. The United Nations says that more than half the population is starving. And still they are being bombed relentlessly. Are we going to once again watch a whole people being dehumanized to the point where the annihilation doesn't matter? The project of dehumanizing Palestinians did not begin with Benjamin Netanyahu and his crew. It began decades ago. In 2002, on the first anniversary of September 11th, 2001, I delivered a lecture called Come September in the United States. in which I spoke about the other anniversaries of September 11th. The 1973 CIA-backed coup against President Salvador Allende in Chile on that auspicious date, and then the speech on September 11th, 1990 of George W. Bush Sr., then US President, to a joint session of Congress announcing his government's decision to go to war against Iraq. And then I spoke about Palestine. I'm going to read this section to you, and you will see that if I hadn't told you that I wrote this 21 years ago, you'd think that I was talking about today. So I'm quoting from this essay. September 11th has a tragic resonance in the Middle East too. On the 11th of September 1922, ignoring Arab outrage, the British government proclaimed a mandate in Palestine, a follow-up to the 1917 Balfour Declaration, which Imperial Britain issued with its army massed outside the gates of Gaza. The Balfour Declaration promised European Zionists a national home for Jewish people. At the time, the British Empire, on which the sun never set, was free to snatch and bequeath national homelands like a school bully distributes marbles. How carelessly imperial power vivisected ancient civilizations. Palestine and Kashmir are Imperial Britain's festering, blood-drenched gifts to the modern world. Both are fault lines in the raging international conflicts of today. In 1937, Winston Churchill said of the Palestinians, and I quote, "I do not agree that the dog in a manger has the final right to the manger, even though he may have lain there for a very long time. I do not admit that right. I do not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia. I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place." That set the trend for the Israeli state's attitude towards Palestinians. In 1969, Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir said, "Palestinians do not exist." Her successor, Prime Minister Levi Eshkol, said, "What are Palestinians?" When I came here to Palestine, there were 250,000 non-Jews, mainly Arabs and Bedouins. It was a desert, more than underdeveloped. There was nothing. Prime Minister Menachem Begin called Palestinians two-legged beasts. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir called them grasshoppers who could be crushed. This is the language of heads of state, not ordinary people. Thus began the terrible myth about the land without a people, for a people without a land. In 1947, the UN formally partitioned Palestine and allotted 55% of Palestine's land to the Zionists. Within a year, they had captured 76%. On the 14th of May 1948, the State of Israel was declared. Minutes after the declaration, the United States recognized Israel. The West Bank was annexed by Jordan. The Gaza Strip came under Egyptian military control, and formally Palestine ceased to exist except in the minds and hearts of the hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people who became refugees, 750,000 to be precise. In 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Over the decades, there have been uprisings, wars, intifadas. Tens of thousands have lost their lives. Accords and treaties have been signed, ceasefires declared and violated, but the bloodshed doesn't end. Palestine still remains illegally occupied. Its people live in inhuman conditions, in virtual Bantustans, where they are subjected to collective punishment, 24-hour curfews, where they are humiliated and brutalized on a daily basis. They never know when their homes will be demolished, when their children will be shot, when their precious trees will be cut, when their roads will be closed, when they will be allowed to walk down to the market to buy food and medicine, and when they will not. They live with no semblance of dignity, with not much hope in sight. They have no control over their lands, their security, their movement, their communication, their water supply. So when accords are signed and words like autonomy and even statehood bandied about, it's always worth asking, what sort of autonomy, what sort of state, what sort of rights will its citizens have? Young Palestinians who cannot control their anger turn themselves into human bombs and haunt Israel's streets and public places, blowing themselves up, killing ordinary people, injecting terror into daily life, and eventually hardening both societies' suspicion and mutual hatred of each other. Each bombing invites merciless reprisal and even more hardship on Palestinian peoples. But then suicide bombing is an act of individual despair, not a revolutionary tactic. Although Palestinian attacks strike terror into Israeli citizens, they provide the perfect cover for the Israeli government's daily incursions into Palestinian territory, the perfect excuse for old-fashioned 19th century colonialism dressed up as a new-fashioned 21st century war. Israel's staunchest ally, and militarily and politically, is and always has been the United States. The US government has blocked, along with Israel, almost every UN resolution that sought a peaceful, equitable solution to the conflict. It has supported almost every war that Israel has fought. When Israel attacks Palestine, it is American missiles that smash through Palestinian homes. And every year, Israel receives several $billion from the United States, taxpayers' money. So this was written 21 years ago. Now today, apart from the war that is being fought in Gaza, as you know, on the West Bank, where there is no Hamas, just in the last month, 200 people have been killed by Israeli settlers under the cover of that war. Today, every bomb that is dropped by Israel on the civilian population, every tank and every bullet, has the United States name on it. None of this would happen if the US wasn't backing it wholeheartedly. All of us saw what happened at the meeting of the UN Security Council on December 8th, when 13 member states voted for a ceasefire and the US voted against it. The disturbing video of the US Deputy Ambassador, a Black American, raising his hand to veto the resolution is burned into our brains. Some bitter commentators on the social media have called it intersectional imperialism. Reading through the bureaucracies, what the US seems to be saying to Israel is, finish the job, but do it kindly. So now, returning to the whole essay, what lessons should we draw from this tragic conflict? Is it really impossible for Jewish people who suffered so cruelly themselves, more cruelly perhaps than any other people in history, to understand the vulnerability and the yearning of those whom they have displaced? Does extreme suffering always kindle cruelty? What hope does this leave the human race with? What will happen to the Palestinian people in the event of a victory? When a nation without a state eventually proclaims a state, what kind of state will it be? What horrors will be perpetrated under its flag? Is it a separate state that we should be fighting for, or the right to a life of liberty and dignity for everyone, regardless of their ethnicity or religion? Palestine was once a secular bulwark in the Middle East, but now the weak, undemocratic, corrupt, but avowedly non-sectarian PLO is losing ground to Hamas, which espouses an overtly sectarian ideology and fights in the name of Islam. To quote from their manifesto, we will be its soldiers and the firewood of its fire, which will burn the enemies. The world is called upon to condemn suicide bombers, but can we ignore the long road they have journeyed on before they have arrived at this destination? September 1922 to September 11, 2002. 80 years is a long time to have been waging a war, but now it's 100 years. We hear some advise the world and the people of Palestine. Should they just take Golda Meir's suggestion and make a real effort not to exist? The idea of the erasure, the annihilation of Palestine is being clearly articulated by Israeli political and military officials. A US lawyer who has brought a case against the Biden administration for, quote, the failure to prevent genocide, which is a crime too, spoke of how rare it is for genocidal intent to be so clearly and publicly articulated. Once Israel has achieved their goal, perhaps the plan is to have museums showcasing Palestinian culture and handicraft restaurants serving ethnic Palestinian food, maybe a sound and light show of how lively old Gaza used to be, in the new Gaza harbor, at the head of the Ben Gurion Canal project, which is supposedly being planned to rival the Suez Canal. Allegedly contracts for offshore drilling worth billions of dollars are already being signed. 21 years ago, when I delivered Come September in New Mexico, there was a kind of omerta in the US around Palestine. Those who spoke about it paid a huge price for doing so. But today in the US, the young are on the streets, led from the front by Jews as well as Palestinians, raging about what their government, the US government, is doing. Universities, including the most elite campuses, are on the boil. But capitalism, big capital, is moving fast to shut them down. Donors are threatening to withhold funds, thereby deciding what American students may or may not say and how they may or may not think. A shot to the heart of the foundational principles of a so-called liberal education. Gone is any pretense of post-colonialism, multiculturalism, international law, the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Gone is any pretense of free speech or public morality. A war that lawyers and scholars of international law say meets all the legal criterion of genocide is taking place, in which the perpetrators have cast themselves as victims. The colonizers who run an apartheid state have cast themselves as the oppressed. In the US, to question this is to be charged with anti-Semitism, even if those who are questioning it are Jewish themselves. It's mind-bending. Even Israel, where dissident Israelis like Gideon Levy are the most knowledgeable and incisive critics of Israeli actions, does not police free speech in the way the US does, although that is rapidly changing now. In the US, to speak of intifada, uprising, resistance, in this case against genocide, against your own erasure, is considered to be a call for the genocide of Jews. The only moral thing Palestinian civilians can do, apparently, is to die. The only legal thing the rest of us can do is to watch them die and be silent. If not, we risk our scholarships, our grants, our lecture fees, and our livelihoods. Post 9/11, the US war on terror gave cover to regimes across the world to dismantle civil rights and to construct an elaborate, invasive surveillance apparatus in which our governments know everything about us and we know nothing about them. Similarly, now, under the umbrella of this new US McCarthyism, monstrous things will grow and flourish in countries all over the world. In our country, of course, it has begun years ago, but unless we speak out, it will gather momentum and sweep us all away. Yesterday's news is that JNU in Delhi, once among India's top university, has issued new rules of conduct for students. A fine of rupees 20,000 for any student who stages a dharna or hunger strike and 10,000 for anti-national slogans. There is no list yet about what those slogans are, but we can be reasonably sure that calling for the genocide and ethnic cleansing of Muslims will not be on it. So the battle in Palestine is ours too. What remains to be said must be said and repeated clearly. The Israeli occupation of the West Bank and the siege of Gaza are crimes against humanity. The United States and other countries that bankroll the occupation are parties to that crime. The horror we are witnessing right now, the unconscionable slaughter of civilians by Hamas as well as Israel, are a consequence of the siege and occupation. No amount of commentary about the cruelty, no amount of condemnation about the excesses committed by Hamas, and no amount of false equivalence about the scale of those atrocities will lead to a solution. It is the occupation that is breeding this monstrosity. It is doing violence to both perpetrators and victims. The victims are dead. The perpetrators will have to live what they have done with what they have done. So will their children for generations. The solution cannot be a militaristic one. It can only be a political one, in which both Israelis and Palestinians live together or side by side in dignity with equal rights. The world must intervene. The occupation must end. Palestinians must have a viable homeland, and Palestinian refugees must have the right to return. If not, then the moral architecture of Western liberalism will cease to exist. It was always hypocritical, we know, but even this provided some sort of shelter. That shelter is disappearing before our eyes. So please, for the sake of Palestine and Israel, for the sake of the living and in the name of the dead, for the sake of the hostages being held by Hamas and the Palestinians in Israel's prisons, for the sake of all of humanity, stop this slaughter. Thank you once more for choosing me for this honor. Thank you too for the 3 lakhs that comes with this prize. It will not remain with me. It will go towards helping activists and journalists who continue to stand up at huge cost to themselves. Thank you.